In many ways, he's an ideal speaker for this conference because, first of all, he understands the importance of bipartisanship. He knows how to work across the aisle and build consensus, and we desperately need that to solve this challenge. But also, he tells the truth. He tells it like it is. He explains the real facts, and he's not afraid to do that. Governor Ed Rendell and Senator Judd Gregg, a Democrat and Republican, wrote in an op-ed just last year that our political discourse needs more truth tellers like Lindsey Graham. So he'll be interviewed today by John Halliman and Mark Halperin, the dynamic duo. So please welcome to this stage. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. See you.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you.
Which one do you want me to get?
You can sit all the way down there. How about that?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for the taxes you paid.
Senator, we'll start easy.
Okay.
Looks like we're down to two likely presidents, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Between the two of them...
What's the easy part?
Between the two of them, who's had the best idea on deficit reduction, and what is it?
You know, I really, from a Donald point of view, I don't really know where he's at on deficit reduction other than he wants to grow the economy, which is a good thing. From Hillary's point of view, to me, where are you at on Simpson Bowles? The next president's got to navigate us to deal with what drives the debt, which is the unfunded liability of Social Security and Medicare. Mr. Trump says, we're not going to touch it. I don't see how you can ever get the country out of debt if you don't deal with Medicare and Social Security's unfunded liability. So I don't know where Hillary's at on that.
Do you think either of them has kind of the at least an abstract prioritization of deficit reduction as part of what they're thinking about for their term, first term or two terms? Either of them have the spirit of it, someone who wants to reduce the deficit?
Number one, of all the things we've talked about in the election cycle, the debt's been the least talked about, the most important. So I can't tell you, I don't know how this competes with people's sex lives, probably not well. So I don't know where she's at on Simpson Bowles. I mean, to me, that's the question, John and Mark. Do you know what Simpson Bowles is? Are you in the ballpark? You don't have to agree to it to be the Bible, but that's sort of the roadmap. Republicans have to agree to flatten out the tax code, which we should. But the problem for Republicans is we have to generate revenue as part of Simpson Bowles. So we're going to eliminate some deductions and credits that all of us enjoy. And we're going to take some of that money to buy down rates, but we'll put some of it on the debt. And you have to violate Grover Norquist's tax pledge. So that's the heavy lift for Republicans. Democrats are going to have to embrace the non-Bernie solution, that you just can't save Social Security by raising the cap, that would adjust the age of retirement, slowly but surely, and means test benefits. That's the grand bargain. And I really haven't heard either one of them talk about that grand bargain. And I promise you this, Republicans will not get all we want on taxes unless Democrats do something on entitlements and vice versa. I'm not going to just expect the Democrats to give me what I want on taxes. So that's where we're at.
Let me ask you a broader question about the presumptive nominee of your party, right? I think everyone in this room knows that you're not a big fan of Donald Trump's, to put it somewhat mildly. In the last week or so, he has reversed course on his previous posture on the minimum wage.
Right.
Now says he wants to raise it, leave it to the states. He's talked about refinancing the debt and not worrying about default because you can always just print more money. And he won. And he would.
Yeah.
And he's made a variety of other kind of attempts to kind of tack to a slightly different place. What should Republicans, as your party now thinks about the prospect of Trump as the nominee, what should they think of him on matters of fiscal, tax policy, budget policy? What's your assessment, and whether the party can somehow come together under a Trump nominee?
I think Trump's actually onto something in terms of broadening the appeal of the Republican Party. Raising the minimum wage, I think, would be bad for the economy right now because it's pretty shaky. Hard to do business. There's a lot of cost to doing business. You probably knock people out of being hired. But the concept of raising the minimum wage, I would put on the table if it was part of a bigger deal. I would tell any Democrat that if you help get to yes on Simpson Bowles, I'd agree to raise the minimum wage in a logical way, in a rational way. So I think Donald's onto something here, talking about the minimum wage differently. I think he's on to something saying that you should pay ordinary income versus capital gains rates on some of these hedge funds. The goal for the Republicans is to say, I'm for the working man, not just the rich man, rich woman, working woman. That's sort of the goal. That's sort of where we're stuck. And I think he's instinctively on to something, trying to broaden the party's appeal to working folks by putting on the table things that we normally say no to.
Now, those may be the nicest words you've ever used about Donald Trump, at least in my memory.
Yeah, and you got a long memory.
And you've said a lot of things about
And you've said a lot of things about Donald Trump, yeah.
Yeah, and I say a lot of things about Hillary Clinton, and never quite get in the sentence. So here's what I'm saying. It's going to be one of these two.
Right.
They're going to have their hands full as president. The world is structurally falling apart. We have a demographic decline in America that has to be dealt with. We're down to 3 workers for every Social Security retiree. In 20 years, we're down to 2, unless you want to do what Strom Thurmond did, have 4 kids after he's 67. Do you want to do that? Can you do that? Raise your hand if you think
that's
you
known
can
here as the South Carolina plan.
Yeah. So I don't have a lot of confidence that that's going to work. I have a lot of people raise their hands, but I'm not confident they can do it. So the bottom line, if that doesn't work, you better have a rational immigration system, don't you think, to supplement a declining workforce. Senator Warner, I'm not writing him off. So the bottom line here is that I wish we'd have a good, serious discussion, get the 2 candidates in a room and say, do you understand Simpson Bowles? How do you save in Medicare and Social Security without adjusting the age of retirement, means testing? Can you do what Bernie suggests, which is raise the cap, put it on all income? No, that won't work. Can you grow the economy enough to close to $70 trillion unfunded liability? No, I don't think that will work. So if those 2 things don't work, then what are you going to do?
But again, let me just stick with Donald Trump for a second, right? I'll go back to the second part of my question. When you heard him talk about the debt and about potentially defaulting on the debt and on printing, on the ability just to print more money, you thought what about this man who's about to lead your party?
That's crazy.
Okay. When you heard him say the other day that the tax plan that he put out a few months ago, which many people have criticized in terms of its deficit implications, that he was now open to the idea of maybe taxing the rich more, you thought what? That's a sensible adjustment, or you thought, or a craven attempt to move to the center?
A sensible adjustment. I mean, what is their solution to the big problem in the room that Peterson found? I mean, why are we here? Because this group has been suggesting to Republicans and Democrats, you need to get your act together. The demographic changes are real. Donald Trump's tax plan does add trillions of dollars. He's willing to adjust. That's a good thing. Where is Hillary on entitlement reform? What is she going to do to deal with the unfunded liability of Medicare and Social Security? Does she have a handoff approach to age adjustment and means testing like Reagan and O'Neill? I don't know.
So
isn't it amazing we don't know that?
Yeah.
Isn't it amazing we're this deep into the election and none of us have a clue of what they're actually going to do to deal with it?
And I don't suspect the conduct of this campaign will tease that out because of his position and the fact that neither of them will want to go there. You know, paraphrase Mark Twain, everybody in this room talks about the deficit, but it's hard to do anything about it. So let's turn this more into a workshop here.
Okay.
And be optimistic. We got a lot of problems, right? The public is not focused. 2 candidates who don't talk about it, as you've said a couple times, unlikely to be front and center. Right. So whoever wins is unlikely to have a mandate on something they haven't run on and haven't shown much concern about. So we'll have Majority Leader McConnell or Majority Leader Schumer. We'll have Speaker Pelosi, Speaker Ryan, and we'll have one of these 2 as president. What can people in the room do to enlist in Graham's army here to make it at least possible, more likely, that next year, deficit reduction is on the new president's agenda?
Here's what I think. I think there's 60 votes in the United States Senate for something like Simpson Bowles. I really believe that. You can't do it without presidential leadership. Boehner and Obama got very darn close. They were like $400 billion. Hey, Admiral Mullen, you're right about the debt being a national security problem. The bottom line is I think there's 60 of us in the Senate that could get to yes on something like Simpson Bowles if you had presidential leadership to the House. Here's my concern. Let's say 2017, by some miracle, Donald loses and Hillary's president. If she wants to do immigration reform, count me in for the 5th or 6th time. If the Senate can pass comprehensive immigration reform, which I think we can, and it goes to a Republican-controlled House, and it dies, then I think our chances of ever winning the White House are almost 0 because we're tripling and quadrupling down on everything is amnesty. Conversely, if the Democratic Party under a Democratic president won't reach out to a guy like me who's willing to do revenue, then I think they've lost a great chance to, quite frankly, to be a good president. I don't know what she would do, but I will tell her, she's not here, she's busy. Madam President, if you get to be president and you want to do something like Simpson Bowles, I think I can get more than a handful of Republicans to flatten out the tax code and take some of the revenue to pay down debt if you will lead your party in terms of age adjustment and means testing.
But what would you like people in this room to do in the next 6 months? Focus, stiffen the spine, whatever it would take to lay the groundwork to say to the next president, whoever it is, if he or she called you, to strengthen your hand? What can be done from your point of view?
I don't want you to get people to sign pledges, but if somehow you can have a conversation in the at-risk seats, and you've had forums in New Hampshire, I've been to a couple of them, just push the idea, try to find a way to make sure people in your business will ask these questions. Just don't let them change topic. Just keep focusing you give me hope, your ads are pretty good. I really like your ads. More money on television, talking about it, trying to create a discussion for people who want to be in the Senate and the House and the next Congress and people running for the president. I'm not worried so much about these people as people in your business. Y'all guys are really good at asking hard questions, but we haven't had a healthy discussion about what makes us grease over time. You know, it's just not enough to say that we're going to leave Social Security alone, we're going to grow the economy, because that won't work. It's not enough to say that we're going to come up with a tax plan that no Republican will vote for, which is raising the cap on all income. And if you can just take those non-answers off the table and make them discuss this, that would be wonderful. So to the extent that the Peter G. Peterson Foundation can drive that discussion at local, state, and national level, God bless you.
Let me ask you, I'll come back to another issue related to debt and deficits in a second and spending, but let me ask you just a purely political question right now. You've talked about this being kind of an existential moment for the Republican Party because of Donald Trump. So what's more dangerous to the future of your party, Donald Trump winning or Donald Trump losing?
It depends on how he loses and depends what he did if he won. The bottom line is the demographic problems we have in 2012, he's made worse. So we did an analysis of the 2012 campaign. How did we lose when we thought we'd win? How did Obama win when every indicator was he should lose demographically? We got 27% of the Hispanic vote. We're really sucking wind with young women, particularly young white women. And what happened? So when you asked Hispanics, what don't you like about the Republican Party? It's not conservatism. It's just this harshness, illogical, hateful, impractical solution to immigration. So Romney went to self-deportation. If you told me in 2013 that by 2016 we'd be running on forced deportation and that Megyn Kelly was a bimbo, we got problems. I hope he adjusts. I mean, to the Hispanic community, I get it why you don't like us. I mean, who's going to vote for somebody who's going to deport their grandmother? I don't give a crap about what your financial plan is or Simpson Bowl is if you're going to deport my grandmother. That's just reality. And families are intermingled, and that's what I'm trying to tell Mr. Trump. It's not easy. You've had people been here 20 or 30 years that have had children and now have grandchildren. You're not going to tear these families apart with their approval. And I don't think you're going to get most Americans to buy into that. Felons, yes. Grandmothers, no, when it comes to deportation.
I know you've said there's no, I mean, we talked a little bit about adjustment here in terms of Trump, but you are not open at all to the possibility of voting for Trump, right? You've said you're not going to vote for Trump under any circumstances. Is that right?
I have come to conclude that the best thing I can do is talk about I can't go where Mr. Trump takes the country and the party. I can't support Secretary Clinton, even though I like her, and I don't dislike Mr. Trump. It's just that I think she hasn't shown a difference in a Clinton administration from Obama administration in things that really matter to me. So my vote's not going to determine the outcome. Right. Now, one thing I will pledge to people in this room, don't you think the next president's going to need a lot of help? I will try to be the Republican, one of many, I hope, that will put on the table things that are necessary for my party to embrace to help my country as a whole. I think there's going to be a lot of people in the Senate willing to embrace revenue if the other side will do entitlement reform.
So would you be interested in a conservative, independent run? Someone who was,
No.
who took, not under any circumstances. Senator
No.
Sass, nobody, that would not interest you at all?
No, I mean, you know, somewhere between Italy and where we are today is where we need to be as a country. I mean, I'll buy you dinner if you can name all the Italian prime ministers since World War II. The bottom line is I like the two-party structure for my party. Let me just talk about my party. My party has a demographic problem that we need to address. We don't need to become liberal. We don't need to reject social conservatism. We just need to be tolerant during the discussion. Most Hispanics are pro-life. Most African Americans support traditional marriage between a man and a woman. Those are not fatal positions in terms of growing the party with minorities. We can have a healthy discussion about abortion, about any social issue, but if we're seen as an intolerant group of people, and when it comes to immigration, if we seem to have animosity in our heart more than hope when it comes to fixing the problem, we're going to lose the fastest growing demographic in the country. I've been talking about this for 10 years. My worst nightmare has really come true, that we would run a campaign to get to the right of where we were before. And we're in a ditch, and I don't know if we ever get out of the ditch.
I'm down there in the ditch. I don't have anything else to say for the moment.
Okay. If you took the party labels off the two presidential candidates and just looked at them and their records and what they seem to be espousing, which one do you think would be more likely to bring about more robust economic growth as president?
I think Donald Trump would think outside the box and be open to a lot of ideas, maybe too many. Hillary Clinton is more of a traditional politician. I think what Trump has going for him is the idea of looking at old problems anew. To talk about the minimum wage being on the table, talk about taxing people at higher rates in the hedge fund world, something that most Republicans would be reluctant to talk about. So I think the energy he's brought to the table about taking the system and turning it upside down probably fits the moment. Here's what I think. Crazy loses to crooked. Crooked Hillary is going to beat crazy Donald. If he's new and different, I think he could win. New and different is different than being crazy. Does that make sense? So that's his challenge, I think, is to show that he's capable of handling the stress that comes with the job. And her challenge, I think, is to show that she's got leadership skills.
Raise your hand if you're willing to admit in front of everyone here that you're voting for Donald Trump. Okay, and raise your hand if you think there are people in the room who are going to vote for Donald Trump but don't want to admit it in front of the rest of you. He's still working on introducing himself to people. There's still an extent, even though he's been on TV for years, in which he's new. You've been thinking a lot about him, not voluntarily, for a while now. What do you still wonder about him as a person? Not in terms of what he'd do, but what do you wonder about in terms of what kind of person he is?
Discipline. Successful. I mean, he beat me like a drum. He beat us all. He did something that was very amazing, quite frankly. He beat a pretty talented field handedly. What I wonder about is, does he understand what makes America great? It's a great saying, but what does make us great? And what are our biggest challenges? I think our biggest challenges are internal. I worry about ISIL hitting us. I worry about Iran with a nuclear weapon. But thanks to Admiral Mullen and others, you know, I think our military can handle almost anything that comes our way. What I worry about Mr. Trump is, will he put all the rhetoric aside and look the camera in the eye and tell the American people, this is the time of choosing. The sacrifices that I ask of you are going to be small now, but greater later if we ignore them. I will never ask of Americans more than they can give. If you're a low-income American, we're not going to ask you to means test your benefits, but we're going to ask people in my income level to means test ours. We're going to ask every young person to work a little bit longer, but we're going to give you time to adjust. When it comes to the two-party system, we're going to make it better. I'm going to lead my party to a better position. I don't know if he's capable of doing that or not, but if he could say those things sincerely, I think that would be music to most Americans' ears.
Let me ask you about a topic that you care a lot about, obviously national defense and national security. It's, you know, one of the big ticket items in the federal budget, in addition to the entitlements that you have talked a little bit about today. Are there places, as you think about the obviously huge cost, keeping the country safe, keeping the world stable, are there places where you think it would be smart to make cuts?
Oh, This markup that I got to go back to in 3 minutes and 12 seconds, we're taking the Pentagon and turning it upside down. We're changing the retirement program. We did it last year. After 20 years, when you join in 2018, you get 40% of your base pay, not 50%. You have a thrift savings plan you can invest in, the government will match after 2 years of service. That will save about $10 billion. You get the thrift savings plan when you're 60. It's asking people to take a little less, 40% instead of 50. You'll be made whole when you're 60. We're asking more fixed price contracts, less cost plus contracts. We're taking the General Officer Corps and reducing it by 25%. We're trying to reduce the number of contractors we have because they cost so much more than an active duty person. The reforms in health care, we're going to ask people like me, a military retiree, to pay more into TRICARE because we haven't had a premium adjustment since 1995. We're going to look at military health care anew and try to modernize it to get people into plans they don't have access today. We've got 110 medical treatment facilities that are run by 7 different agencies. We're going to consolidate them into one. We're going to rearrange the Pentagon to make it more efficient. But having said that, we'll be spending by 2021 2.3 to 4% of GDP on defense. The historical average is about 4.6. By 2026, we'll spend 3% of GDP on interest on the debt. We'll spend more on debt than we'll deal with the military. And I think that's why Admiral Mullen said, when he looks out into the future about defending the nation, the pressure that comes from an exploding debt due to the unfunded liability of Medicare and Social Security and other entitlements is becoming a national security problem. You could eliminate the Department of Defense and not move the debt needle much at all. So I'm going to end where I began. I don't know how to save this country from a fiscal calamity without a bipartisan approach to what drives the debt, which is 80 million baby boomers retiring en masse over the next 25 years with not enough workers paying into the systems to keep them afloat. You're going to have to ask people to sacrifice where they can. If you can afford to take a little bit less, we'd appreciate it. If you can afford to pay a little bit more, we'd appreciate it. If you're younger, we'd like you to work a little bit longer because you have to save these systems. When I was 21, my mom died. When I was 22, my dad died. We lost everything because my mom had Hodgkin's disease. We were underinsured. We got $300 a month Social Security survivor benefit payment to my sister because she was 13, I was 22. Moved in with an aunt and uncle who never made over $25,000 in their life working in the textile plants. If it wasn't for student loans, Pell Grants, and that survivor benefit check, we would not have made it. I'm 60, I'm not married, I don't have any kids. I'd gladly give up $400 a month if I had to save Social Security. I would pay more into Medicare if that was required because I can afford to. I'm in a good spot. I think most Americans would follow that model of Simpson Bowles. To the Peterson Foundation, you're doing the Lord's work. More ads, don't give up. Challenge the next president, next Congress to do things that we all know we have to do. There's no easy way out of this mess. The only way you're going to get out of it is to get out of it together. And I think what Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did in the 80s needs to be duplicated at a deeper level. I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic with the right presidential leadership. We're going to get there, and we can't get there without you. Thank you all very much.
Both the end of lunch and the first speech for Graham 2020. So thank you.
Thanks a bunch. Thanks, guys. Thank you.